Howdy, everyone. All right, I want to go over a few things before I get too far along here and forget about them. First of all, what I've decided to do, I have actually opened up this seam here. The gap on this seam is now a little bit bigger than it was. This side was bigger than the other side, so I didn't have to do too much on this side. But like I said, I wanted a nice, even, flat seam. I didn't want the seam itself to be wavy, and I didn't want the space between the two cowlings to vary. So I went ahead and opened that up the entire length. Again, I'm going to be wrapping this cowling with vinyl. It's not like the vinyl is super thick, right? I don't even know how thick it is exactly, but I just wanted some space in here because I want to wrap potentially around the seam on both cowlings, and I didn't want these to vibrate against each other and potentially cut that vinyl or kind of chafe it and wear through it. So I wanted a decent seam. Of course, I did not do the offset hinge, so you can see the knuckles inside of the seam. That does not bother me. My plan is to paint those knuckles the same color as whatever the vinyl is going to be, so it will blend. I could have bought the hinge that I used is the hinge that came with the kit, and it's not very wide, so you don't have a lot of room to shift it up and down and still get rivets into it. I could have spent the money and bought new hinge that was wider so I can do the offset. The knuckles would not be shown, and I would still have room to put the rivets through the hinge. I just didn't want to do that. I'm fine with this the way that it is. I'm fine using the stock hinges, and I didn't see the need to buy new ones. So I've done the same thing on the other side so that both sides now match. This one I just did, and it's got the same size space, the same gap, and it's nice and straight. And the distance between the two cowlings as you go along this edge does not vary. It's just nice and flat. I've been revisiting my seams everywhere else, and I'm going to keep them like they are. They're pretty uniform everywhere, and they're big enough for the vinyl, and they're not overly obnoxious. So I'm going to go ahead and keep everything else the way that it is. I don't think I need to do any more with seams. Here's the oil door in place. Of course, I don't have it pinned at the moment because I need to get in here to get my top pins out of the cowling. And I don't have the mechanism set up in here to run my pin in and out. But you can see with, just finger pressure, it lays down nice. I had it pinned, like I believe I showed in the other video, and it holds it down nice. There are no gaps. There are no major gaps anywhere along the edges of the door. So like I said, it's not for everybody. I know most people like to build these in actually flush with the cowling, which is great. I just didn't want to. So this is done for now. The only thing that I wish was a little bit different, I wish I would have made this piece, this curved piece of the hinge, bigger so that the door could potentially open back further. If it opened back far enough, it would stay open on its own. But I didn't do that, so it doesn't open beyond halfway, so to speak. So it always wants to close. So that could be annoying when you're trying to reach in here to get hinge pins out, but I'm not there yet. Another note is I didn't think about the placement of this hinge in relation to the placement of this hinge here. So you can see that this hinge actually comes inside of the cutout opening about 1/2 inch. You may want to keep that in mind. You may want to either make your opening a little bit bigger or try to get this hinge so it doesn't stick into the opening. because in effect, this now makes this open area where I stick my hand smaller. But you cannot cut out this opening too far because there's a built-in flange. You can feel it. So the cowling comes up and then it dips in like this, and that's where the door sits. If you cut that too far back, you'll lose that dip if you decide to keep it mostly stock. If you're going to cut your own opening and do your own flanges and all that stuff, then you can make it whatever size you want. Just an observation. So like I said, this hinge ends up making this opening just a little bit smaller the way that I had done it. But other than that, this is working out great. I'm very happy with the seams now. And I'm going to move on to inside of these, the top cowl inside here. There are fiberglass pieces, part of the kit, that are curved like you see here. And these get attached inside of the top cowling inlet. So they get attached to the inlet on the inside, and then they kind of go up and they get attached to the cowling here. Now the instructions say that those just need to be epoxied. To hold them in place while the epoxy dries, you need to have the top cowling in place so that it maintains the correct shape while those inlet ramps cure. The only way to hold those in place with the cowling in place is to drill holes through them and through the cowling and to use clecos. So that's what I'll be doing. And I don't think I'll use any kind of rivets or anything. I think people have done that as well. Well, they'll do like countersunk rivets along with the epoxy. Or maybe fuel tank sealant, I don't know. The instructions don't mention fuel tank sealant. They explicitly state to use an epoxy mix. And they don't mention anything about using rivets. So I'm just going to do it that way. I'm going to fit them inside, figure out where to position them, figure out how many holes I need to use to hold them nice and secure while the epoxy dries, and then just fill those holes on the cowling when I get ready to do the vinyl. All right, so that's coming up next. I still need to install my nut plates. I got nut plates that need to go in here. I got nut plates that need to go into the bottom. And I'm not sure what else at this point, but that's all to come. All right, I'm going to start on these inlet ramps, and I will talk to you guys later. All right, so back to the oil door one last time. I wanted to show you the inside, how it looks and how it fits now that it's basically done. Of course, I need to figure out how this hinge is going to be attached, or I mean the hinge pin, so that it can't come out. I've got a couple ideas for that. One is just simply put a very slight bend on each end so it can't work its way out, but not so much that I can't straighten it and pull it out when I need to. I probably will do something as simple as that. And of course, like I said, this hinge pin is ultimately going to be pulled out through there, but I need to put those inlet ramps in first, which is what I'm getting ready to do here next. But anywho, here's the hinge half on the door itself. Of course, it's got spacers underneath it so that this face of the door is even with this face of the cowling. That way these two hinges will line up correctly. I've got the wider hinge on the cowling side because this hinge needs to be offset, because this hinge needs to go with the door. It needs to fit in the opening. So this hinge is offset. This gives me the advantage of being able to move the hinge but still have good edge distance on the hinge itself and on the fiberglass cowling. So since I've got these riveted and positioned correctly, the hinge pin moves in and out freely. You can see I can move it around just by hand. And like I said, this area here is thicker than this area, so when you try to pull the hinge pin out, it kind of gets hung up on that transition, but you can simply just pull it and slide it out. So now this is done. I'm very pleased with how it has turned out, and it lays really nice on the cowling itself. I don't know if I can show that here very well, but it's up under there. All right, so let me get started on these inlet ramps, and I will talk to you guys here shortly.